I'm for sure not going to be the last YouTuber out there or the first YouTuber out there to make the connection between these guys, a Nike Dunk High Rebel Cashmere, and these guys right here. That's a Nike Air Force One Shadow from the women's line. Now, I think both of these guys are women's. I know the Shadows from Air Force One are women's, and then these guys today as well, the Air Force, the Nike Dunk Highs, I think are also from that women's line. They're inspired by those Air Force One Shadows, and there are places on these shoes that are just exactly taken out of there. There's certain color elements, there's certain structure elements that make that connection, but then there's also certain parts of these shoes, these Dunk Highs, that stand alone and are kind of cool all on their own. Now, those Shadows from the Air Force One, especially the colourful one, I think I've got a picture of two different colourways, and one's a bit sort of stripped back and simple, but the other one is a sort of more vibrant, colourful one. It's that colourful one that I've seen in a lot of different places, that Air Force One Shadow for women's. And then if we come back to today's shoe, you can see those connections between them. Now, I'm going to take you through a couple of little details on the shoe that are connecting the Air Force One Shadows and these Dunk High Cashmeres, or Rebel Cashmeres, I believe they're called. And this is a kind of trend at the Nike line right now. They've been taking standard silhouettes and just sort of tweaking them in little ways. They did it with something over at the Dunk line. It was a Dunk Low. I don't think it was women's, but they reimagined it, added some layers, changed the construction ever so slightly. It's almost like a Dunk 2.0 or something along those lines. And then you can see that in these Dunk Highs as well. They've reimagined it ever so slightly. It still retains the Dunk High kind of silhouette. And you can look at it and say, that's a Dunk High, but then there are little bits on it that are pushing it a little bit, taking it a little bit different. And I guess they've got the right to do that. If you think about next year's Air Force One, it's since 1982 until 2022, that's 40 years, the 40th anniversary year of the Air Force One next year. If you've been churning out the same silhouette for 40 years, I think you've earned the right to tweak it a little bit. It's the same with the Dunks. Dunks first came on the scene in 1985, and they would have been a huge shoe if Jordan 1s hadn't also come on the scene in 1985. And Dunks got relegated and stayed relegated until the early 2000s when skateboarders took them over. And it's a funny little thing because people don't really think about the name of things that much when they're so sort of ubiquitous and out there and like cover so many different areas of the sneaker community. Dunk is a sneaker for basketballs, for basketballing. It's a dunk, and you know, people forget that that actual name Dunk is a basketball name because it's so much associated with skateboarding these days now, especially when they put the SB skateboard on there for the SB Dunk Lows. And that was in the early 2000s, took the line in a different direction, gave it a bit of a new life, if you know what I'm saying. But then if you've been making these shoes, so if the Dunks of 1985, this is 2021, that's 36 years this year, and then this year's also the 39th year of the Air Force One. That's enough time to be making a shoe or making some shoes to be able to tweak them a little bit. But yeah, you can't play with the core. You have to stay with the core sort of silhouette, the core story of the shoe. And then these guys are just sort of radical offshoots, little kind of investigations into an interesting different world, and then pull it back to the classic silhouette. You don't take the whole line in this new direction. You just sort of go out there and do a little bit of experimenting and come back in. And that's what I see with these Dunk Highs. It's the first time I've seen Dunk High Rebels, and I'm sure there must be tons of them out there, you know, and there'll be other silhouettes and other colorways from this line, but this is the first time I've come across them, and they're due to drop on August the 10th, and I'm shooting this video on August the 1st. That means they'll be coming up to you guys on YouTube on about August the 4th, maybe, about a week before the drop date, which is exactly what I want to be doing, shooting content from Tokyo, Japan. Yes, the Olympics are still ongoing as we speak. The 100-meter final has just finished a couple of hours ago, and Italy took home a shot gold there. And you know, I'm in Tokyo, Japan while the Olympics are going on. It was meant to be a big deal, but we're all in lockdown and no people going to spectate on the games, which is sad. But anyway, all that aside, you know, the whole sort of date for this shoe, August the 10th, is about a week away, and hopefully this video will give you some insight into this shoe as you think about whether you want to get your hands on it or not. So let's go through it and have a look at all the details on there. I'll start with those two, for me, Air Force One tie-ups, and then we'll look at some of the other interesting things on there. Now, the first thing I think is easiest to look at is if we go and have a look at the midfoot panel on the lateral side, and it's just to do with the way the colors are blocked and the choices of the colors, because some of them are kind of a pastel color, especially in the middle of the midfoot with that kind of pink pastel feel, and it's wrapped around with also kind of pastel blue on there. But then you've got some other stronger colors that come alongside that in greens, for example, and that's very much like those Air Force One shadows, this kind of balance between the pastel colors and the more solid colors. So it very much echoes the Air Force One in that midfoot section, except in one point, which we'll get to in a minute. But before we get to that, let's go to the second thing that echoes those Air Force Ones. And I can't think of any better way to describe this than air between the upper and the panel. And what we're talking about is, instead of a panel being stitched flush to the upper, there's a sort of air between it, there's a gap between them. And what we're talking about is the ankle support that runs down into the heel on dunk highs. And you can see in this picture here that there's a bit of a sort of an elevation in there. There's a bit of separation between the support panel and the upper itself, and that's a signature of those Air Force One shadows and these dunk high rebels. And then also, if we go forward from that towards the front end of the midfoot section, you see the quarter line on there is double layered on there. There's an extra layer just behind the sort of quarter line layer, and these are all significant features that are very similar to what's going on in those Air Force One shadows. And then the reason why I wanted to start on this midfoot panel, and the other thing going on here that's unique that I didn't see over the Air Force One, is these double swooshes. And it's not like a Sakai where they have two different swooshes that are the same size but layered and in two different colors. What we're talking about is a big, large, standard leather swoosh, and then placed over the top of it, kind of slightly out of sync with it, is a black embroidered swoosh, much smaller. So whereas Sakai, it would be same materials and same size swooshes, maybe in different colors and slightly offset from each other. In the case of these guys, the different colors are there, but different sizes as well, and the different materials, where the larger swoosh is leather and the smaller swoosh is embroidered on there. So these are kind of the main details about the lateral side of the shoe. And an important detail, actually, and I will flip it out and have a look at this, is as far as I'm aware, the medial side only has singles swooshes on the side and doesn't have that double stacked swoosh effect on it. And now going up high and having a look down below into the insole and onto the tongue branding on there, I was kind of surprised to see that both of these are in a very simple black on white construction. I was expecting to see something a bit flashier, a bit brighter down on the insole and also on the top of the tongues there, but no, they've gone with the kind of bog standard branding and colouring in there. But then that's completely in contrast with the heels. The heels, for me, is a great place to look at all the colours, because they sort of taper into each other and you can see all the colours stacked one on top of the other. Whereas if you look at the midfoot, for example, there's lots of different kind of angles and ways to look at the different colours on there, but on the heel they're all stacked up for you there, and you get a sense of those colours all drawing together in the heel section of the shoe. Now, speaking of the heel section of the shoe, it's one of those few places where you get a bit of contrast in materials. We're talking more high quality materials and treated materials, as you can see in this picture here. Instead of being just standard leathers, there's a bit more going on here, and you've got a bit more treatment to the leathers and a bit more quality in those leathers there as well. Now let's flip these guys upside down and have a look at the outsole. There's two important details going on here. One is a border effect that's very much like a blazer. If you imagine the blazers with the middle section of the outsole wrapped around the edge with the midsole in a different color, often gum sole in the middle and white midsole on the outsole. And then on this here, you can see the border is a very sort of sail concrete color, and that's housing in the middle of the white outsole on there. And that's kind of a neat effect, that border effect in different color from the actual outsole itself. But also, if you look at the construction of the outsole, it's very different from your standard dunk high outsole. So they played around with that as well and put some detailing into there and done it in a slightly different way to what you would expect from a standard dunk high. So I think that's pretty much all the details on this shoe. So we'll come back out and have a look at the whole thing. Like I said, August the 10th is a drop date for these guys, and I'm not pretending at all to be some kind of sage or prophet that can see the future. And it's like the Air Force One Shadow is a very similar shoe to this. I'm sure many people have said it before me, and a few people will say it after me as well. But that, for me, is quite the biggest detail on these guys. But it's still a very cool looking shoe, and dunks are very hot and have been for many, many months. I would go so far as to say maybe 18 months of really hot dunks, and a lot of dunk highs in recent times as well. So a great looking shoe, coming out on August the 10th. With that being said, it's time to wrap this video up. Another video in the bag for the day. Daily content every single day of the week, 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year, and we're heading towards the end of this month when we'll get to 1,000 consecutive days on YouTube. So fingers crossed we can keep churning out the content. For now though, time for me to wrap this one up. Thank you guys for checking out the content, and I'll say the same thing that I say at the end of every single video, which is that I do this every single day. That means that you are guaranteed to see me tomorrow.